I'll start with sharing my screen while people come in. This just takes a little bit of reorganizing my screens here. Good. So we'll start slowly but surely. So my name is Diego Briseno. I'm the program lead in equity and inclusion at the Canada Media Fund. I'm joined here by my colleague Mireille Darvaux, who's going to talk a little bit later in this presentation. For those who have a difficulty seeing me today, I just want to describe a little myself. Identify as a man. I'm a Latin American of Indigenous and European descent. You could probably tell my face if you could see me, and the color of my skin. I have short black hair. I have a light goatee, beard, and I have a dark blue shirt that kind of looks black in the screen, but it is. And I've made soft my background to not distract you with my cat or my decorations in my office and my house, just for the introduction for those who can't see me properly today. So today we are joined by many participants from across the country. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have been and continue to be the caretakers of the land. I'm joining you from Tiohtià:ke, or Montreal, which for thousands of years has been a gathering place for Indigenous nations, including the Kanien'kehá:ka, or Mohawk, from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, the Abenakis, and the Anishinaabeg Nation. I will also recognize that this land is home to the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade and others who have arrived here through forced displacement or seeking asylum from unsafe homes. Many of us descend from people who have arrived here by choice and have benefited from the displacement and forced assimilation of Indigenous peoples, which continues to this day. From coast to coast to coast, we recognize the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this land home. And I think we're ready to start with this presentation. So I'm going to move forward. As you can see, we have ASL interpretation today available. So thank you very much, Caroline, for this. And we are recording the presentation. We're in a webinar mode, so it's mostly us, but so you know, some of your questions might be expressed in this video, and this video might be used publicly eventually to help others with questions. I also want to tell you that we're going to be taking your questions by the Q&A function in Zoom. So it's below. It's one of the main features we have there, Q&A. And you can start asking questions throughout the presentation, but we'll only address the questions at the end of our session. But please feel free to include any question there. And if ever we don't have enough time to answer all the questions, we'll take note of your name and contact information, and we'll come back to you at a later date. Sorry, I have to move everything in my screen. So yeah, the agenda of today. So we're going to talk about Persona ID, the big whys, how this came to be, and its main features. I'm going to introduce some of the changes of equity and inclusion for the programs this year, that are going to help us understand some of the questions in the current questionnaire of Persona ID. We're going to also highlight some of the terms of use and privacy, which I think are important for all of us in this time and age. And then I'll let my colleague Mireille Darvaux speak at the end about the impact of Persona ID on all our programs, just to highlight some of the main things you should know about this. And that's it. At the end, we're going to have also mention about dialogue application, how it impacts, how it's going to be expressed in dialogue, also by my colleague. So let's get into it. So why Persona ID? would have to say that I came to this job in the equity and inclusion kind of team of Canada Media Fund in late 2020. And from the very beginning, we realized that to do our work, we were missing an important piece here, which was data. We had very little data, even though CMF has a strong history of collecting data. We were not collecting data for specific demographics or communities. This obviously made our life very difficult to understand how to approach it, how to create measures to support especially underrepresented communities across the country. This led us to do different efforts, consultation, reports that combined brought us to Persona ID, the need to have a system to collect this data. And from the very beginning, we gave ourselves kind of these 5 main objectives with the data. So, make sure that this data could inform us in the decision-making for future changes. That's our goal right now, to make sure that every year we can learn from the data, make adjustments, accommodations, improvements, create new incentive, adapt the ones we have. And that's kind of right now a priority for all of us, and actually part of our global plan for a new model, program model, and for the future of the CMF. It also obviously, in a more practical level, allows us to determine eligibility to certain programs and to certain incentives, which again, my colleague Mireille Darvaux will explain a little bit further later on. For us, for our department of equity and inclusion, it also helps us detect inequities, in the funding and representation. So we'll be able to gather not only the information of who gets supported, who gets funding, but also who doesn't. So applicants, and see the gaps that we see there, and find ways to solve that. We also can find longer term trends, follow trends and patterns in the participation in the funding. This also allows us not only through programs, but actually through more targeted initiatives. For instance, what we do through sector development, so helping initiatives in particular communities or groups to support them better access, give them better access, and kind of leverage the barriers they might have to receive funding from us. And finally, we want to be able to report back to stakeholders, to the entire public about these results. I think it's my experience so far has been that it's very useful when we bring the data. We are discussing from a very objective perspective that obviously combined with more qualitative work, with obviously the implication of other organizations and individuals, gives us a better portrait of the situation in the country. It's important to mention that we soft launched this initiative, the system, in September with 2 programs. First with the pilot program for racialized communities, PPRC, in development, pre-development, helps us kind of see the reaction, get some feedback, and that was obviously very useful in this context, because there's a requirement for individuals to be from a racialized community in this program. But also we use it in the pilot slate development program, which is also a unique program that allows to use the system with other type of applicants, and also gave us even more information about improve and help us improve the system that we have right now. So now we're launching since April 1st Persona ID across most of our programs, to not say all of the programs that we have at CMF. We'll look at that in a moment. So some of the main features I want to mention. First, we really wanted to have a single identification number, so a number that you have to after completing your form once, you get the number, and that number can be used for any application and multiple applications, and as long as you want it. This also helps us avoid something that was happening in the past. The producers were the ones requesting this information. We felt, and actually, we realized that more and more this was very sensitive. Producers asking some sensitive questions, initially, for instance, about gender, then obviously racialized and ethnocultural identities. And now, as we're going to see, as we expand our definitions, the 2S LGBTQ community, or people who identify as 2S LGBTQ, and persons with disability. So this is obviously, we needed a system that allowed individuals to identify directly to us and not going through the producer. We wanted, obviously, people to edit it, so you can create an account and you still can edit it afterwards. However, I want to note here that as long as the project, your profile is attached to a project, it will be locked with that identity as you put it there, and we'll be treating the application with that lock identity. You can still change it, but it will only be reflected in future applications. Most of the questions we're asking give you the option of I prefer not to answer. It's important. So you could actually fill it up with mostly that answer, just because we know that some of the questions are sensitive, or you might not agree the way they're asked, or whatever the reason, please feel free to respond, I prefer not to answer. In the same vein, we're trying to make the system as safe and confidential as possible. It is not secret, so it is confidential, not secret. And I go back to this question of I prefer not to answer. Some analysts will be seeing some of the answers. Obviously, we're being strict about just looking at the answers that are relevant for any evaluation of programs. But it's important to know that people will be seeing some of the answers. So if you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, insecure, you're always free to simply say, I prefer not to answer. And finally, the terminology for one of the biggest pieces here, I know from some of the people who are joining us today, it's a discussion for other organizations, institutions, broadcasters. We did as extensive a consultation as we could, but we understand that it is not perfect. And we're going to be continuing our work, listening to any feedback you have, the organizations, individuals, applicants, and we're really open to improvements in the future. So I'm going to do a little parenthesis here, just to understand the questions and the type of sections we have in our system about some of the changes, just for you to understand the reason why some of the questions we're asking. So starting April 1st this year, first of all, we expanded the definition of what we call diverse community. Until last year, this meant Indigenous peoples to Canada, racialized communities. And starting this year, we're going to include the 2S LGBTQ+ and persons with disability. My colleague was going to explain some of the implications of that across some programs, but it is significant. So it's important that for us to keep track of who is identifying and give people options to do it as they want to. Then we also did a change in terms of gender. So our initiative for gender balance now use the term individuals who identify as women. So that was an important piece as well. As you know, we have incentives. We have had them for a while, and they will continue to be there. But for us, it was important that the individuals had the option to do this directly and personally, and the way they felt they wanted to do it. And so this system also allows us to do that. And then finally, we created an accessibility support system to offer financial assistance to persons with disability who are trying to apply to the CMF. Again, it was important for us to track and to learn from the communities, and obviously Person ID has a strong link to this. Again, important to note that anyone who is a person with disabilities can contact us. They don't have to fill up Person ID to get access. They can actually contact us, and we can help them fill up their Person ID if needed, if help is needed. Sorry. So yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end about how to contact and how to access this support. Good. So let's get into Persona ID. First of all, pretty straightforward. We have a microsite, a web page, a landing web page on our website. So it's cmf-fmc.ca/persona-id. That is the direct link, but you have the same link in every single page of every single program page, in our website. So it's pretty easy and redundant across our platform right now. So, and when you go there, you scroll down a little bit and you'll find this blue box that we see in the screen at the right that asks you for their basic contact information. We encourage you to use your personal email, not your company email, because we understand some people might be using their company email for instance, working with our dialogue or application form. We want to encourage you to use your personal, because you might want to use this across different projects. Maybe you're working in the future with other companies. We want to make sure that this is your personal trusted email account that you're going to be using, that's going to be your main identifier in the system. Then as soon as you fill this up and submit, you'll get an email with a link. Just make sure to check your spam and inbox as usual, and your spam inbox, sorry, just to make sure didn't fall there if after a couple of minutes you didn't receive it. And then before you fill up anything in the same page, you'll have access to a PDF version of the terms of use and privacy and the questionnaire. If you want to just make sure that you're comfortable with it, if you want to think it over, you always can download it. Just make sure please understand that paper registration is not available to us. You still have to go to the form to fill it up and complete it to create your account. So let's get into the content of the questionnaire, because maybe I want to make sure you don't, we solve some of the questions that you might have when you encounter it. So first of all, your pronouns, just to highlight, you can choose multiple pronouns, and we have a list, but you can actually even create your own pronouns. The year of birth is, to be honest, a question that is not related to directly to any of our programs. We don't have a program for particular ages, but I have to say, last year across the consultations we did find that we were concerned for certain numbers we're seeing in terms of the population of the producers were from particular communities. We're concerned of make sure we had like a newer generation of producers out there, and just to follow the health of different brackets of age across our clients. So that's it. Again, you have the option to say, I prefer not to answer here as well. If you answer below in terms of being a Canadian resident or citizen is yes, Canada, you'll be prompted to two different questions. One would be to specify your municipality and province or territory. This is important because, as some of you might know, we have programs that are dedicated to regional production. So people who are outside the big metropolis, mostly Toronto and Montreal, given the context of our industry. And you'll be prompted also to answer the question if you belong to an official language minority in Canada. Here, the options will be, yes, I am a Francophone outside Quebec. Yes, I am an Anglophone in Quebec. No, or I prefer not to answer. Then we go into the section of gender and sexual orientation. So these two first questions are very plain questions that are helping us with our analysis of the applications. So the first one is mostly to capture persons who identify as women. So here, the first one would have options of woman, man, or other, including two-spirit, non-binary, genderqueer, gender non-conforming, etc. And then the second one is also a yes/no answer. So if you identify as a 2S LGBTQ plus person, if you do answer yes to the second question, you'll be prompted to be more specific if you want. We've proposed a number of options here, but we know it's not complete list. So feel free to include any other definition that you might prefer. It's important to note here that obviously we're taking the 2S LGBTQ term as an umbrella that covers both gender and sexual diversity. I also want to highlight something that is probably a question you might have, and we've had a lot of debate, and we have been doing a lot of consultation, is about the term openly. I know it might be sensitive, but talking to members of the community, we thought that was important because we obviously want to address issues from individuals who encounter barriers, systemic barriers in the industry. So it's really to highlight that we want to make sure we're serving the right people, the people who are really lacking the support and that need that extra support in the system, that are finding those strong barriers to produce content or participate in the industry in any way. Then we go into Indigenous people to Canada. Here we have the question is, do you belong to one of the following Indigenous people to Canada? So the first level question, the answer would be First Nation, Métis, or Inuit. Obviously, no, I prefer not to answer. But if you answer First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, we ask you to be a little bit more specific about your nation, community, tribe, settlement, reserve, family, or anything else you might find relevant here. This is an ongoing process. We're in close communication with the Indigenous Screen Office, and this question might evolve in the future, but right now is for us a first level or first way to capture the information, to be more specific about the identification of the individuals coming through Persona ID. You also have here the option to refer to the language, Indigenous language you may speak. This again, our Indigenous program has a component, a requirement for Indigenous language, but through the consultations, we've felt that there's a large disparity among communities. So some communities that have their language well and alive, some are struggling, some have actually their languages almost disappeared. We just want to make sure that we're tracking this properly and that we're not just having a blank kind of approach to all the diversity within the Indigenous community. This question is important to note that the language questions are purely for statistical purpose. It's just a matter for us to follow and track what is going on. Then we go into racial and ethnocultural identities. So at first we have, we ask people to select one of the standardized categories that we propose. Again, always a difficult question here, because we had multiple consultations. I know already we don't completely agree. Everyone agreeing on some of the categories. We're trying to be as neutral and at the same time as observing as possible to the nuances of individuals, and that's part of why we call this standardized categories. They're not perfect. They're artificial, but it's important for us to track what's going on in the industry and with the different communities. Important to note that the categories presented here with a star, with a red star. So Black, Latin American, Middle Eastern, West Asian, North African, South Asian, Southeast Asian, or East Asian are considered for the CMS as racialized communities. So important also to note that we have some further definitions for these terms in our guidelines. For those who know the CMF a little bit, we added a section at the Appendix A that has a further definition on each one of these terms. Still in racial and ethnocultural identities, we also ask about language. As you know, we have a diverse language program. This, again, question will not be used for any eligibility piece. It's simply for us to understand the diversity of languages that we're receiving from the applicants and individuals who are attached to these projects, and just be able to pull some very interesting statistical information from it. And we leave a question open here for other terms. This, again, from our consultation, was very important. I think some people are concerned with the big silo categories, and we still want to track what people prefer. So feel free here to create. There's some examples there, but some people might prefer to identify with their nationality of origin or their religion of choice, or any other term that they might prefer. So I might identify as a category Latin American, and here I might choose to say Colombian, and maybe mestizo, which might identify me ethnoculturally. But again, every person has their own choices, and we'll be looking at it, maybe learning and maybe implementing further measures to be more nuanced and specific about the choices that you prefer. Finally, the final section is about persons with disability. We have, so a first question, yes, no. If I am a person with disability, again, yes, no, and prefer not to answer. If the answer is yes, you'll be prompted to be a little bit more specific. We are proposing a list, a very not complete list, and as usual, you have a place to write your own specificity. But we have the usual categories that you would find, plus we're open to any other option that you propose. And then secondly, we ask you if you require any accommodation to communicate or to access our information or to work in your field. You might need a ASL interpretation like we do today. You might need closed captioning when communicating with us. You might need audio descriptions. Anything that may be required for us. Again, this doesn't affect your application. It's just for us to know how to better serve the people who are coming to Persona ID. Finally, on my side, I want to highlight the terms of use and privacy, the famous small print that we tend not to read too much. I just still want to highlight this. I encourage you to read it. We made it as plain language as possible, but still, we know people skip through this. I just want to highlight some of the elements you should probably note here. First of all, make sure you understand that the information will be handled in accordance with the CMF's privacy policy. This is, again, the policy that is implemented for any other information that the CMF carries. And we do carry already a lot of sensitive information from many of our applicants, be it financial, be it any other, or from your company, different things. We follow the same strict privacy policy. We take your word, so we assume that you're representing yourself and the information as accurate at first. So basically, we're taking, our analysts will take whatever you include in this form as accurate by default. You can modify the information anytime, like I said before. That's important for us. And it's important for us to tell you that most of the information will be used, aggregated and anonymized for statistical and analytical reporting. This is internal to stakeholders and public facing. So rest assured that individual information is very, very limited. There's very, very limited to access. And that's why the other point is, so that limited access information. So that's why I was saying it's confidential, but not private. CMF staff and some of our support at the CMF PA, CMF program administrator staff at Telefilm Canada will have limited access to your information. I would say mostly they'll be able to check on the relevant information that really is applicable to any program or any incentive that we have. There's no broader scope to this. People will not be looking at other more broader questions. All of that will be analyzed in a statistical way. And finally, however, CMF reserves the right to delete or disable accounts that it seems inaccurate, redundant, or fraudulent. This is really exceptional. We don't expect to do that really often, but we still need to do that. There's a lot of discussion right now still about this type of issue. For instance, with indigenous communities and some of the cases we've heard in the past, we're still open and vigilant about any possibility that might occur here. And that's it for me. Oh, it went by. So I'm going to pass the turn to my colleague Mireille Darfo to talk a bit about programs.
Thank you, Diego. And I see nice questions coming in, so we'll save time
we'll have fun
answer.
At the end.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Well, thank you. So the portion I want to present is more about the interaction or the implication of persona ID with the programs. I work with the CMFPA, so the team that administers the program for the CMF, and they have a lot of answers for you when after the session if you need some information. But I will look at what is the main interactions between persona ID and the programs. And I take the opportunity also to tell you that next week on the 21st, there's the session for the changes to program guidelines, 21st at 2 p.m. for the English session. There's one French session at 11. So if you have not registered yet, it's still time to join us for the main changes. So regarding all programs, I mean, meaning the experimental stream and the convergence stream, all the selective programs, or most of the selective programs we have evaluation grids. We use the approach that most of you were familiar with for parity. That means that we are using 40% of the eligible paid positions that are held by members of diverse community when we want to evaluate the points for a diverse community, and the same approach for parity for the 2 points that are available. We will use the information from the numbers from persona ID. It's only 2 points each for the different evaluation grids. So if no number is available at application, we will not ask for them. It's if it's there, it's good. If it's not, it will. It's only 2 points, and the team will pass. So so that's some information interesting to have also. The other element for all the program that is used where we're using persona ID is to identify if a project is eligible to a carve out that we have in the program budget. So we have program budgets where we set aside 25% of the budget for diverse communities, and we do have the conceptualization program from the experimental stream, and from the convergence stream we have the pre-development and also the early stage development program. So the same approach is taken. We're looking at 40% of the eligible positions. And for the early stage development program, since the writer is the applicant, well, we're looking at this only applicant if he is a member of a diverse community. So this is how we're able to assess if a project is eligible to that portion of the budget. If we received the question regarding what are the eligible positions that are, that we need to look at for the experimental stream, for example. What are the positions to be where we need actually a persona ID number if we want them to count? So for the 40%, we accept for the digital linear series program, which is closer to the convergent type of productions. So all the other programs, we're looking at producer, executive producer, director, that includes technical director, creative director, art director, and also interactive director. Senior programmer is also a position from the eligible position list, designer and project leader. All this information is available in the guidelines. So don't worry, you can go back to the guidelines for the details, but I think it's important just to understand how those 40% of cumulative paid eligible positions are from, what positions are calculated. That's for the experimental stream. And if we look at the convergence stream, in the convergence stream, there are two very important programs where we really must have a persona ID number to be able to assess the eligibility. So the Indigenous program and the pilot program for racialized communities is the PPRC are the two programs where we really need that persona ID number to assess eligibility. In these programs, you need to meet the 2 out of 3 positions to be members of the racialized community or Indigenous community, if we're talking about Indigenous program. And those 2 mandatory positions to be eligible are producer for all the time should be there. And the other position would be either screenwriter or director. So for example, if you have a series, we would like this, well, we would like this requirement. This is a requirement that would be applied for every episode. So you could have a producer and a director for one episode and a producer and writer for another episode. That would be okay. So this is just to be clear about this one. It's really eligibility. So really, really important at application to have the number in the application form. And if we look at the other programs, how they're affected or how the interaction between persona ID with the program works. For performance and development envelopes, as you know, and we already had installed the diverse community license fee factor for the performance envelopes. That was used. That's a factor that is counted already for the envelopes. And this year we added the development the development fee factor that is now new, and we are looking at the persona ID number to be able to confirm if a project meets or not this this definition. So broadcasters, to know if they have they meet that factor, will just receive a report where they have a yes or a no. They don't have any details on who could help, like who is would be considered member of a diverse community that would qualify this project to receive the factor. So it's really anonymous in that sense. There's also the gender balance requirement, which has been there for many years now. So the broadcasters are going to be able to see in their report if the project meets or not this requirement. And the same, we are counting the 40% of all cumulative enumerate eligible paid positions held by individuals that identify as a woman. So this is how the gender balance requirement is looked at, and it's through the persona number again. So it's just a persona number session. And what are the eligible positions for the conversion stream? Well, we saw in the experimental, they were, related to that field positions. And for the convergence stream, we're talking about producers. So all the list of the producers that are available in the guidelines in the envelope manual. So, and also the creative team. So creative team, we're meaning writer and directors. So these positions are the ones to be concerned, or to make sure that we have the persona ID number if we want a specific, if it needs to be counted for some measure, or parity measure, or for a diverse community special program or points. So they are all counted, and it includes also the digital linear series, which I mentioned earlier, that was excluded from the experimental stream because it's closer to the way a production in Convergent is made. The dialogue application, I know a lot of you are familiar with dialogue. This is the platform we use when you submit an application for a specific program. In the past, the applicant was collecting some information from from the writers, directors, and also producers to identify if the gender and other more personal information. This year, the key personnel has a special section to identify the persona ID number. So this is how in the application form in dialogue it is now changed. So there's no more the other sections don't exist anymore. And there's also a new section that was created. So it's a directors and shareholders section, a new section to be completed in the form. And it also, there's also a section, not a section, but a form, a new form that was created that's replacing the shareholder and directors form. And the form is called Declaration of the Corporation's Canadian Status, and it's shareholders and directors. So this form basically covers the Canadian status, but also the directors and shareholders. And we have the persona ID number. So we can relate the percentage of the shareholder to the persona ID number. And the persona ID number is the only element that will be in the application form in Dialogue. So that's technical, but I think it's important to understand the basics. And if you have information, there's a great team, well supported team for you to reach out, and it's Telefilm Canada. The coordination will give you the address in just a moment. So Persona ID, the CMF self-identification system, you can register and consult the documents at the address that you see here. So cmf-fmc.ca/persona-ID. You can, of course, this new version of the form that Diego just showed you is very recent. So the information will be, I think, after the session, I'm pretty sure will be available for all of you to look at. We had the previous version, I think, still up until this morning. So we will make sure we update this. On the website, there's also, if you're looking for, well, if you're going under the programs, there's a very useful document that we've created. It's under the guidelines and reference, and it's called Persona ID by Program. So that's a list of all the programs, and you can see per programs what are the elements that could be affected or the interaction with persona. So please use that document. It's going to be very helpful, I think, especially for applicants that come and apply with different programs with us. For help creating an account, or if you have questions, there's, as I was saying, a great team of coordinators available for you. And the address is cmf.fmc.coordination@telefilm.ca. And this address and the information is also on our website. If you look at the Persona ID page, you will find this information. There's also other suggestions, questions, or improvement, anything regarding the content of Persona ID. We have a dedicated address, email address that you can reach Diego or the other members of the team to suggest your improvements, suggestions. It's persona-id@cmf-fmc.ca. And there's also the accessibility support available. So access@cmf-fmc.ca, and at any time you can reach, and we'll redirect you if to the program, or how we can help you with anything. So don't hesitate if you need some support to reach us. And I think we covered most of the elements. Diego.
Yes, Mireille. I think, we're ready to go through your questions. I would still like to encourage you to see the webpage for Persona ID. We have a big section of frequently asked questions, and FAQ. It's important to, just make sure some questions might be simple and easy to respond directly there before you contact us. If not, still feel free to come to us, our team. I also want to highlight the fact that anyone can register to, even we're being a little bit specific here about some particular roles that for this year are relevant to our programs, but other people from the crew, and there's probably we're going through the questions, but I want to just highlight it. It's not a particular group, a particular community. I think we want all Canadians to participate. We left options and nuances there for anyone to express their identity. It's not perfect. It's again, as any categorization, is a bit artificial, but it's important for us, and it's important to understand that this is for a greater good, for understanding who we are and who's creating and being represented in our media. So I think we're gonna open. We have a few questions. We have quite a bit of questions. So I think we'll go from top to bottom and as we get them. So actually, I'm going to jump in, Mireille, if you don't mind, to the first one, because it's related. I just see that it's related to what I just said. So, and you feel free, Mireille, to add into anything I say, and vice versa. So the first one is this number for all personnel, cast and crew, etc., or just production office? So again, I think, I don't know if the question was posed maybe before Mireille.
Yes.
I think maybe when before she went through the list. So I think now you have a better idea. But again, any category that you used to be able to do, all categories, all roles can have a persona ID, even the ones we didn't mention. So anyone in the crew, the usual CAFCO roles, everyone can have a persona ID. And honestly, I think in the future we'll be adding different criteria that might include other roles. So it's not lost. If you have the number ready, we'll take it at its statistical value mostly. If it's not really one of the roles that Mireille just enumerated. But yeah, so it's really to everyone, and the specific roles, well, you saw them in the list. If you have other questions, let us know. Let's keep on going, Mireille.
Mm-hmm. So the other question I see, can you select multiple pronouns, gender identities?
Yes. Yeah, that's a simple answer. Is you can select multiple, and you can create your own. So you can be from the list that we offer plus anyone you create, and you can have multiple pronouns. Yes.
Great. The next questions I think I answered. I think the question was, the questionnaire we're walking through is different from the PDF available. So we will, of course, after the session, now it's just brand new, and it will be available for all of you shortly. So thank you for this.
Yeah.
The other question.
By the way, it was
put
on. It came live. This new questionnaire and everything we're discussing came live yesterday. So we're really fresh out of the oven. So bear with us. We might have some little tweaks still to do, but it's actually active and functional right now. Yeah. Go ahead, Mireille.
How would someone who splits time within Canada and LA answer the residency question? I would say, how do your tax answers the residency questions? But so I'm not sure. I think we can, maybe you can send us your question more precisely in the by email. That would be nice, so we can understand the case and maybe help you a bit more. That would be very good.
I'm gonna leave the so you know the share screen so we can see our faces probably better, and also give more of a highlight to our interpretation.
Yes. So, okay, this is a good question. So if one or more key creatives are hesitant to, or refusing to sign up for Persona ID for a PAP or ERPB application, can we let them know they can answer, I prefer not to say, to most of the questions? Of course, you can. We won't. The information is their own information. So as long as we have the Persona ID for the programs, we're good. Some of the questions, when they will look at it. By experience, we know that finally they agree to answer. But of course, this is available to answer at any time. So yes, absolutely.
And like we said before, they can modify it. Maybe they're hesitant at first, maybe they change their mind, or vice versa. They respond to something, they're probably not sure. At any time they can change it. So that's another, I think, reassurance for some people.
Absolutely.
Next one is similar. Okay, so I'll read it out. So the next one is, so are CMF analysts able to look at individuals' questionnaires, not just the stats relevant to the project they're analyzing? It's a very good question. Right now, we're really using the relevant information that is to analyze a project, and that's why some of the sections we separate them. For instance, that's why the question about women, for instance, for people who identify as women, or the question about 2S LGBTQ plus is kind of a dedicated question. So analysts can only see that. All the terminology, extra words, extra categories, subcategories, that is not really intended for view of anyone in an individual level. Is really for statistical purposes. However, we have to admit if there's any issue, there are people in both, limited amount of people, both at the Telefilm side and CMF, that can open an application and look at it. But we're, just to give you a sense, I don't see it individual names, even though I'm I'm leading this from the CMF side. I prefer not to see any names. I'm just seeing mostly aggregated information. And with any particular question issue, I only look at the persona ID number and not at the name. So just to give you an example, but we'll be continuing. I think this year is going to be a learning process. I totally understand the concern about privacy of some of these delicate questions, and we're really happy to listen, learn, and improve the system for the future. That's good. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Okay, as a producer, it's currently difficult to gather GAFCO numbers from personnel. Would it be possible to make individuals' persona ID numbers easy to find? Example, searching individuals' numbers by name via dialogue.
Mm-hmm. There's a pros and cons, and thank you for the question. It's an issue actually we've discussed in the past. So at least as a producer, just to reassure you, and I know it's a bit of a sensitive thing, but when you enter the number of someone, it would confirm that it's the right name to the number. We currently don't have that option, and I think we would have to go further in consultation and see how it goes this year before we create a directory of a persona ID of any sort. But it's an interesting point, and I have to admit, this is part of our initial brainstorm we have, and it's not completely discarded of how to allow people to at least confirm that the number is the right number. But right now, at least you have that. When you enter the number, it confirms that is the right person, that it matches the name you're putting in, just to make sure there's no typo or there's no something. Sometimes people use different names or spelling to their names, and just make sure that corresponds. But that's the only thing we have right now.
Thank you. So we have a very interesting question from Susan Kelly. Since gender parity is calculated on every performance envelope project, won't persona ID be mandatory for all eligible positions on every PE project? The persona ID is a number that you can ask, they can be asked, but it cannot be mandatory. So we will work with the information that is on the form. We have everything. Every application will have the space to add the persona ID number. And we understand that sometimes it might not be available. We'll work with the information that we receive. And I think, as Diego was saying, we're open to, we'll see how this first year will go, and we'll adapt, we'll adjust if needed. So we do understand this could be an issue, but we are jumping and we're trying, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and the question about mandatory, voluntary is again an existential question. We're discussing. This is the first year for this. I think we wanted to go, soft, understanding there's going to be a learning curve. Not everyone's going to be directly on, but we understand your question, and it's again part of the discussions we've had, the possibilities for the future, and we'll keep in touch. I think it's an important question because we might have to find solutions, but I think the future is going to be a collective discussion between broadcasters, CMF, and even other stakeholders and institutions across the country to be able to have something that is, comprehensive and standardized for everyone. But unfortunately we're behind. We're late a little bit in Canada compared to other countries, but I think this is the first important step we're doing towards a more comprehensive, broader system.
There's a question where we don't have all the answers right now, so I think we can skip and get back. Actually, if we could receive it's an anonymous attendee. So if it's possible to write to the CMF coordinators to have your question so we can answer properly. The question was, our broadcaster might increase in order and allocate 2022-23 money. If that happens, how do we communicate the demographics for the back half of a split cycle? So very good question. I'm sure we thought about this, but I really, I don't have the answer live. So please send us a question in writing and we will absolutely answer back. Thank you.
We'll take note. And there's someone who specializes in this particular question on our team. So, and it's not Mireille or myself right now, but we understand the question. It's very technical, but I think it's an important question to answer. Yeah. Can we get a rough estimate of response time to an application? We made it as simple as possible. We estimate no more than 10 minutes, but again, there's different speeds. But that's our estimate. I really went through the whole thing. I mean, I didn't include all the definitions we have and all the welcoming text. And obviously there's a signing of agreement. Obviously, if you want to read the terms of use and privacy, that takes a bit of extra time. But again, you have a PDF version if you want to read it before you go in, or later even, you can consult it at any time. And we're going to make sure that they're up to date. Like Mireille said, as soon as we finish this call, I'm going to go check that we have everything up to date so everyone can look at the latest version. What if we have corporate shareholders? Okay, that's a very good question. Mireille, do you want to give it a try?
Well, you can try.
Okay, we can try. Okay, good. So yeah, it's a very good question. It's been kind of one of the issues we had, as you know. So for those who don't understand, so a company can be owned by other companies, plural or combination of individuals and companies. Traditionally, and this is nothing new, we go up, so we're requiring every entity to fill up a shareholder form. So as high up as we need to find the individuals, relevant individuals.
Exactly.
Might be a case for there's public, how do you call this?
Publicly traded companies.
Publicly traded companies, that's another story. But for them, we're really focusing on the corporate directors instead of shareholders.
And everything, if you look at the new form, the one I was mentioning earlier, Declaration of the Corporation's Canadian Status and its shareholders and directors, you'll see instructions regarding those special cases. We're asking to fill more than one form to get to the individuals. So I think it's clearly explained, and our team at the coordinators are there to help you if you have any other questions on that matter.
I have to highlight that in the online form, you'll be asked to enter the actual individuals, not really the corporation. So the list of individuals, so shareholders, no matter their level in the company, will be required to fill up be entered into the, not required because again, it's voluntary, but if you want to access some of the, either the programs or the incentives, yeah, you'll need to enter the individuals into the online form as well. Continue.
Okay, so for a project that a broadcaster is using their envelope towards, that is not a project with 40% of eligible paid positions being filled by women, a person ID is not required, correct? Well, it's not required, correct. But as Diego was saying, since data is so important and we want to help the industry, if we can have as much information, as much personal ID numbers as possible, even though there's no impact, it would be very helpful because there's other informations like the mention of the region and other elements that could be very useful to plan ahead for future years. So thank you for your question.
Okay, next one. What should you do if your applicant company is owned by an organization? Does the organization need a persona ID?
So we did answer that question, I think, just before. So there are no numbers for organization. Just to be clear, the numbers are really for individuals, and we will ask with the new form, the declaration, to go up to the individuals that are owning all the companies to have this individual fill the person ID number and enter it in the system.
Since we're mentioning organizations, I just want to highlight that we're also giving support through sector development support, which is an initiative to support capacity building or research in the industry. We'll also be using Persona ID in that case, something we didn't mention because not directly in programs in our traditional program system, but we're going to be asking for board members and executive directors to identify for applications to sector development as well. Just a little note and taking advantage of that question.
Great. Next question for you, Diego.
If I don't openly identify as 2S LGBTQ+ and answer no to the question, would that affect eligibility to programs early stage, for example, diverse community applicants to point? Well, that's why we separate the question, the yes, no. If the answer is no, you will not be deemed in that category. Again, I mean, please take the openly word with a grain of salt. What we meant with the openly is we're, like I said, really addressing these programs and incentives to people who do live the prejudice, discrimination, exclusion in society. That is kind of the intent of this question, but you could also contact us, let us know. Maybe you have a particular case, an issue, a reason why you don't want to express it properly. And we're, again, this is a year of learning, so please don't feel shy to contact us and see maybe there's an option we can discuss if you feel that the question is not addressing your situation.
I think maybe we should skip the next question since
we're hitting the time.
Yes. Okay, so this one, it is mandatory for the creatives, writer, producers, directors, and shareholders to register. Is there some sort of penalty if someone doesn't register? If one of the creatives on a project has an objection or refuses to register, are there any implication or penalties? Well, there's no penalty, obviously no penalty, but if it is to access a parity or a diverse community or a program that would be that would meet, to meet eligibility, that could be an issue. So so I think that's the answer.
I would think that the highest mark, there's no penalties. There's no penalty for anyone of not wanting to do this. Voluntary at all times. But I would say for Indigenous and PPRC, so the pilot program for racialized communities, where the stakes are higher, because you will not be able to be analyzed even. You will not pass on to being considered. So I think that is where it's more sensitive, more important for these communities and for these programs to understand the implications. But again, we did this already. We did, that's why we did a soft launch and we already tested this. It seemed we got no problems in the first soft launch, but we expect problems in the future. That's how it is. As soon as we say there's no problems, we'll have problems. Listen, contact us again. If you have a situation, talk to the analyst. And let's see if we can find a way. As people, we understand people might have some hesitations, doubts. It's private, it's information, personal information. So just keep us in touch, or we can talk directly. Some of the individuals that might be hesitant, if they have questions, we're here to help.
Mm-hmm. We still have a few questions. Should we?
Let's go. Let's try. Okay, I mean,
perfect.
I'm sure people are busy. They might leave, but we'll stay a little bit more and okay, see how it goes.
I'm good with it. So if an individual does not answer the question to a persona questionnaire, how does this affect the point allocated to the selective program? Or on the broadcaster side, how will this impact the threshold for diversity and gender parity? Well, this is why we presented the interaction between programs and persona ID. It's important to know that we won't be able to evaluate since we won't have the information. So the impact is we won't have that information to be able to confirm for broadcasters or to confirm the 2 points.
I have never seen an option on these kinds of questionnaires for physical visible deformity. Do you know why this is? It's a very good question. This is our first baby step, I would say. We have a lot to learn. We've been in consultation. As you might know yourself, we're still building the momentum of having organizations that really represent properly. We've relied heavily on organizations out there in the industry. We are actually working very closely with certain organizations and trying to respond to different questions and again, going through this categories. But I would say that feel free to enter the blank space that we left to enter anything. We are completely aware, and the same goes for ethnocultural communities, the same goes for the 2S LGBTQ communities, and obviously for persons with disability, that we didn't provide a complete list. Your point is taken, and I think I wrote it already, and that's going to be ongoing conversations, and feel free to reach out, and I might reach out to you, and we might have a conversation on this, because in the future, nothing impedes us from including more nuance and more terms into the list.
Good. So 3 more questions, and please feel free to add if you have anything. We still have a couple of minutes for you. If signing up for a persona ID is voluntary, and the key creatives or key producer declines to sign or provide one, but their role is pivotal to the show, could that potentially jeopardize our PAP or ERPB application and create a situation where the key participation in persona ID is actually mandatory? Well, we're talking about PEP or ERPB. ERPB being regional, we don't use persona for regions at this moment. So this is not an issue. For performance envelope projects, well, depending if the project is to be calculated with the diverse community factor, or the gender parity, that could be, potentially we wouldn't count if we don't have it. But it's not, the show will still go on, if I must say. So thank you for your question. There's another question, interesting. If the personal ID numbers indicate, I prefer not to say in all questions, do I understand correctly that my application will not receive points I might be counting on? Absolutely. Yes. So this is the idea is to have the personal information provided by anyone that wishes to provide that information, and we won't have any more control on that. And Diego, please jump in to continue my answer.
Yes, I mean, the idea with this question, the option for not to answer, it is maybe some people are comfortable answering some questions and not answering others, or maybe answering the higher level question and not the detailed question. If the higher level, for instance, if you're yes, no, person to us LGBTQ person, that might be sufficient already, and you prefer not to answer the more detailed question. But we do need the higher level. So do you identify as a woman? Are you for the Indigenous program, First Nation, Métis, or Inuit? We need that basic level. And obviously for the racialized communities, we need you to choose a particular community that we consider a racialized community to consider it. So yes, at that point, the person would need to at least complete one of these to be considered, because again, back to the analyst is going to be checking yes, no to that question in the system. It is green or red, sorry, and that's how we're making the decision at the end.
And
we're getting to the end.
Yes, so you'll have the final question, Diego.
Okay. You mentioned that this will help reduce producers asking a sensitive question, but if persona ID number aren't available to producers and producers need to meet certain percentage requirement for diverse communities to meet funding criteria, doesn't the producer still need to know who identifies in a particular way? I find it difficult to bridge this subject when beginning new creative relationships. Yeah, it's a very good question. Obviously, we basically right now the producer, if they want to apply, for instance, for PPRC, for the pilot program for racialized communities, obviously for application they need to know their shareholders and the key personnel, as Mireille just highlighted, so producers, director, writers. The advantage right now is you can simply say, would you fit into the bigger picture of diverse community? Does the person identify as any of these categories in diverse community, or at least racialized community if it's racialized community, or Indigenous? All the detail about the nuances, what particular community or any other terminology will be private and personal to the person filling out persona ID. But I understand your point, meaning, yeah, to be able to apply, you need to know that at least the key personnel and your shareholders are part of it. And yeah, I mean, it's just striking a balance, which is a challenge. And again, like I said, if you have any issues, questions, or you want us to talk directly to the individuals, please let us know. We'll be happy to explain it further, reassure people if we can, and hopefully work it out. But again, I understand there might be some cases where there's challenges, and we're here to listen and to try to find solutions as much as we can.
We have another question, a nice question. I think we need to answer this one.
Go ahead.
Someone who got their number early has received a note that the questionnaire has updated. They may not be able to log back in by Tuesday. Can we still use their existing number? Diego, you want to answer this one? Final word to you.
Yeah. So all the previews, so you know, we had a soft launch with some limited access to programs in the previous fiscal year. And since we did some accommodations and some adjustment to the questions, some people who are already in the system yesterday received an email stating that some changes had been done. Just to point out, there's very small change in the terms of use. We just wanted to be explicit that some people understood that who is accessing the information internally, also how we're going to report to broadcasters. Sorry. And in terms of the questionnaire, the main change was a subtle change in the question about gender, and then gender and sexual diversity, meaning we just reaccommodated how the questions were organized. That is it. But your number still stands. If the answers are still correct, we're still manually, we actually adapted everything that was in the previous answers back to the new system. So there shouldn't be a problem for that. But it's good to know that there's some changes.
And the number is still good. So.
And the number is still good to the short answer. 311. I think we did quite a bit. I hope we responded to everything. We had a few things, but I think we went through everything. Thank you very much. Caroline, thank you very much. It was a little bit longer than expected. So I'm sure we can all take a little break now. Thank you everyone for attending. And like we insisted from the very beginning, feel free to contact us. Go to the website, webpage, look at the frequent asked questions, and don't be shy. This is a beginning. We're going to be doing outreach across all year round, more consultations. If you have a very clever idea of how can this work even better, if you have something you dislike from the system, we're really open to hearing from you. So just let us know.
Thank you.
I think we're done. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mireille. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Emmanuel Carrière, who's helping us with the webcast. And see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.